He was just a quiet janitor at the Marine Sniper Range, old boots, worn jacket, and a haunted silence. They mocked him. They poured Coca-Cola on his back for fun. But when he picked up that rusted rifle and fired a single shot across 200 yards, they learned the wind never lies, and neither does a legend known as the Sand Ghost. The sun hung low and merciless over Whiskey Range, casting shimmering waves across the desert like heat-born ghosts. At 110 degrees Fahrenheit, even the rattlesnakes had the decency to keep hidden. But on the open gravel line of the Marine Corps Sniper Qualification Range, sweat rolled freely under Kevlar goggles, fogged, and tempers burned hotter than brass casings in the sand. A steel gong stood 200 yards away, a distant glint in the wavering heat. 10 Marines, most of them young, shirt-sleeved and sunburned, lined up behind spotting scopes and rifles. At the center stood Sergeant David Miller, Force Recon instructor, lean, square-jawed, with a sleeve tattoo half faded from deployment sun, and 2 years of thinking he already knew everything worth knowing. Wind call, he barked. One of the younger guys, Lance Corporal Jenkins, looked up from his digital kestrel meter. 3.6, right to left, gusting. Miller adjusted the scope on his M110 DMR, exhaled slowly, then squeezed. Crack. Miss. The spotter flinched. Low. 2 inches off center. Round hit gravel. Miller cursed under his breath. One by one, the Marines took their shots, each met with frustration. Either the wind was lying, or the steel had grown a grudge. Every missed bullet ricocheted into the silence, like an insult nobody wanted to acknowledge. Maybe the range flags are off, someone muttered. Or the mirage, another added, hoping to save face. They blamed everything: gear heat, defective ammo, poor factory loads. Anything but themselves. But in the farthest corner of the range, barely noticeable amid the scattered targets and gearboxes, a man knelt in the sand, gathering broken clay pigeons into a weathered canvas sack. He wore no uniform, just an old green military jacket, faded jeans, and boots long past their prime. His long hair was pulled back, streaked silver at the temples. The sun did little to tan his pale, weathered skin. His back curved with quiet labor, deliberate and unbothered. No one knew his name. Most assumed he was a janitor or some forgotten relic on maintenance duty. His name was Michael Bray. But if you had served in the jungles of Da Nang or the valleys of Kunar, or survived the siege of Marja, you'd have known the name carried weight. Too much weight for comfort. As Miller adjusted his rifle again, something odd caught his eye. The janitor, the old man, stood motionless, staring out toward the target line, then slowly turned his head and spoke. 3 wins, he said softly. His voice low and calm, almost like it was meant for the earth, more than for them. 1 at 200, 1 at 600, 1 at your muzzle. They're cross-swirling, not gusting. Your scope's reading the mid-wave. You're missing the harmonics. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the chuckles came. Jenkins elbowed another Marine. Well, I guess NASA can retire. Janitors got wind magic. Miller rolled his eyes. Thanks, Einstein. We'll let you know when we're aiming at ghosts, another Marine added with a mocking grin. You forget your magic stick, old man. Or do you whisper to bullets? Michael didn't respond. He simply knelt again and picked up another broken clay. Calm. Silent. Miller wiped the sweat from his forehead. Unbelievable. This guy thinks he's reading the wind better than a $10,000 anemometer. But Bella Donovan didn't laugh. Captain Bella Donovan, range supervisor, stood under a tarp, nearby, clipboard in hand. At 33, she was one of the few female officers commanding respect without ever having to raise her voice. Her black hair was pulled tight into a bun, her sharp brown eyes shielded by aviators. She watched Michael for a long, quiet moment, a flicker of something tightening in her chest. Not pity. Something else. She saw what others didn't, the way he moved like someone born with sand in his boots, the way his fingers brushed a discarded casing, not with carelessness, but reverence, the slight adjustment of his foot to read the breeze by how it touched his cheek. Something was off about this janitor. Or maybe something was exactly right. She walked toward Miller. "You're blaming the heat again," she asked, her tone even. Miller nodded. "Ma'am, the humidity's messing with scope calibration. Mirage is bouncing all over the reticle." "And yet that old man just called your mistake before you pulled the trigger," she said evenly. Miller smirked. "Ma'am, with respect, he's picking up trash. I doubt he's seen through a scope since black and white TV." Bella looked at Michael again. He was wiping sand off an old rifle, an M40 Vietnam era. No scope upgrades, no carbon fiber bipod, no rangefinder. Just walnut and steel, worn smooth at the grip. He didn't even lift his head to acknowledge them. "You ever seen a man so still?" Bella said under her breath. Miller glanced back at the range. Another missed shot. The gong didn't even ring. The Marines were losing faith in the steel. But the steel wasn't the problem. And over in the far corner, Michael Bray simply sat holding his rifle like an old friend who hadn't betrayed him yet. He leaned into the wind, slightly closed one eye, and without even aiming, whispered to no one. "It's not about defeating the wind. It's about listening to it." By mid-afternoon, the heat had turned cruel. Mirage lines shimmered off the desert floor like restless spirits. The metallic scent of spent gunpowder lingered in the dry air. Sergeant David Miller rubbed the back of his neck, annoyed. Another miss. The steel gong stood undisturbed, taunting him with its silence. His pride as a decorated force recon trainer was beginning to fray. "Check the software," Miller muttered. "Checked it twice," Jenkins replied. "Kestrel's clean. Mirage still dancing. Then recalibrate wind calls. Something's throwing us off." He didn't say what everyone was thinking. The old man's voice still echoed in the back of their minds. 3 winds, cross-swirling, harmonics. What kind of janitor talks like that? Miller stood upright and stretched, rolling his shoulders, as he walked toward the shade where his team was refilling canteens. Bella Donovan watched from the observation tarp, silent, calculating. At the far end of the range, Michael Bray crouched beside his canvas tool roll, cleaning his rifle. Not out of necessity, out of ritual. Every stroke of cloth on metal was done with the patience of a man who understood time better than most. He ran a finger along the scope lens, then to the bewilderment of 2 nearby Marines lifted the rifle and looked through the optic without even shouldering it. He wasn't aiming. He was reading. "What the hell is he doing?" one of the Marines whispered. Trying to see the future, the other smirked. Michael didn't speak, but then casually, without turning, he said, "The dust kicks left at 200. See that shimmer heat shift at 800. Mirage flutters like that when it folds over crosswind." The 2 Marines blinked. The older man had just read the entire firing lane like a weatherman watching nature breathe. Sergeant Miller, now walking back toward his team, caught the end of it. He frowned. "Hey, old man," Miller called out, voice carrying across the gravel. "How about you stop giving ghost stories and let the real shooters work?" Michael turned, slightly, eyes calm, but piercing. There was no mockery in them, just observation, like a scientist studying a phenomenon. "You're not fighting the wind," Michael said gently. "You're ignoring it." Miller chuckled dryly. "Right. And I suppose you're some kind of wind whisperer." Michael looked down at his M40, its scratched wood stock, its steel barrel etched by time, then back at Miller. "I've lost men," he said quietly. "Good men. Because we thought we could outshoot what we didn't respect." The range fell quiet. No one laughed this time. The word "lost" carried a weight that bypassed rank and age. But Miller, pride now bruised, wasn't backing down. He stepped closer, crossing the firing line, now standing 10 feet from Michael. "You know what I think," Miller said. "I think you're just a ghost looking for attention. You hang around this range like it still owes you something." Michael didn't flinch. "I don't need anything from this range," he replied. "But maybe this range still needs something from me." The words landed with a gravity that was difficult to define. Not boastful, not defensive, just true. A younger Marine, Private Logan, let out a soft whistle. "Damn, that's a line." Miller turned on him. "Shut it." The tension was a live wire now. Miller's face twisted into a grin, sharp and sarcastic. "All right then, Wind Whisperer. Tell you what, if you can hit the 200-yard steal with that museum piece of yours, I'll admit you're right. Hell, I'll even give the whole team the rest of the day off." He paused. "But if you miss, you pack up that rifle, and you don't show your face around this range again." Michael stood, slowly brushing dust off his jeans. His movements were unhurried, unfazed. "I didn't come here to prove anything," he said. "I came here to remind you that patience matters. Listening matters. Machines don't teach that." Miller smirked. "You're dodging." Michael looked at him long and hard, then finally said, "Fine. One shot." Bella, now standing just yards away, felt her chest tighten. This wasn't a performance. This was something deeper, something dangerous. She spoke up. "Miller, that's enough. He's not part of your unit." Miller didn't even glance at her. "He's on my range." Bella stepped forward. "And I'm in command of this range." The two locked eyes for a moment. Then a voice broke through, calm, aged, resolute. "I accept." Michael's reply silenced everyone. He slung the M40 over his shoulder and began walking toward the firing line. As he passed Bella, she caught a glimpse of something under his sleeve, a tattoo faded with age. It was an old recon symbol. Below it, USMC Scout Sniper. And underneath, so faint it looked like a scar, was a call sign, Sand Ghost. Bella's heart skipped. She didn't say a word. Not yet. But something in her shifted. This man wasn't just a quiet janitor. He was a page out of history, one written in wind, blood, and silence. A restless silence clung to the air. All eyes tracked the man in the green jacket as he laid his M40 carefully on the shooting mat. His fingers moved with the familiarity of 1,000 repetitions. Each action, setting the bipod legs, folding his sling, wiping down the optics, was performed not with the robotic efficiency of a machine, but with the reverence of a ritual. He wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't out to impress. He was listening. Bella Donovan folded her arms tightly across her chest, her aviator sunglasses now pushed up on her head. Her eyes hadn't left Michael since he passed her. She hadn't said it aloud yet, not to anyone, but she recognized that tattoo. She'd seen it once in a declassified briefing years ago. The Sand Ghost wasn't a myth, not to certain units in Afghanistan. But what the hell was he doing, sweeping brass on a training range? "Let's go," Gramps, Miller called from behind, his voice laced with smugness. "Let's see if your ghost stories hit steel." Michael didn't respond. He adjusted the sand sock under the stock and settled into prone position. His right eye lined up with the optic. The M40 wasn't new. In fact, it looked older than many of the Marines watching. Its walnut stock was worn smooth, the barrel slightly darkened from countless cycles of fire. No digital enhancements, no external ballistics computer. Just wood, steel, glass, and memory. Before he could touch the trigger, the mockery came. One of the Marines, Private Torres, unscrewed the cap of a bottle and raised it high. "Coke break, old-timer." Michael turned slightly, then froze. Splash. The Coca-Cola hit him square on the head, cold liquid running through his hair, down the back of his neck, and over the scope of his rifle. The soda hissed as it hit, hot metal droplets dripping from the barrel onto the sand. Torres laughed. The others followed. Even Miller grinned, though uneasily. The joke had gone a little too far, but it was too late to stop it now. Michael didn't move. He sat up slowly, took the hem of his worn sleeve, and gently wiped the scope, drop by drop, never speaking. His face didn't contort with anger. No barked response, no fire in the eyes. Just stillness. That stillness was louder than any yell. Bella stepped forward. Private Torres Michael raised a hand gently. "Don't," he said, soft but firm. Everyone fell quiet. "I've been shot at by warlords who didn't miss half as often as you boys," Michael said, still not raising his voice. "If a splash of cola is the worst thing that happens today, I'll call it a gift." Even Miller found himself swallowing hard. That line hadn't come from pride. It came from experience. "I offered a challenge," Miller said. "Recovering." "That stands." Michael finally turned to look at him. "It was never a challenge," he said. "It was an invitation to listen, but you turned it into a bet." Miller crossed his arms. "Then prove me wrong." Michael stared downrange. The steel target shimmered in the distance, distorted by heat waves. Even for younger eyes, it would have been difficult to focus. For an older man with no external tech support, it should have been nearly impossible. Bella took a step forward. "You don't have to do this." Michael didn't even glance at her. He simply said, "I do." But not for them. For the wind. He closed his eyes, and the range disappeared. In his mind, he wasn't in Arizona anymore. He was back in a jungle clearing in Vietnam, then a rocky ridge in Kunar, then a rooftop in Fallujah. Different decades, different enemies, but always the same language. The wind. The earth whispered if you knew how to listen. Mirage wasn't just distortion, it was code. The way heat curled above a rock, the flicker of a leaf midair, the roll of sand across a ridge, all of it was data. He opened his eyes. Michael reached forward and adjusted the scope, not by measurement, but by feel. He raised the cheek rest by a millimeter, settled his jaw into place, centered his breath. Then he looked across the firing line and spoke calm and deliberate. "You know why most shooters miss?" Miller rolled his eyes. "Please enlighten us. Because they think a bullet is just a piece of lead. It's not. It's a conversation with time and pressure. You can't force it. You guide it." The words hung there. Unusual, poetic even. From someone who looked like he'd just stepped out of a forgotten barracks. Michael returned his gaze downrange, and then he did something unexpected. He stood up, walked back to his tool roll, unwrapped a single object, an old folded handkerchief. Inside it, a small brass casing. He loaded it by hand into the chamber. Only one shot. No second chances. Then he returned to prone position. Miller laughed. "This is ridiculous." Bella didn't move. Her arms were still crossed, but now her breathing had slowed. Her focus locked on every twitch of Michael's finger. He breathed in, waited, exhaled, and didn't shoot. Not yet. He waited longer than anyone expected. 15 seconds. 30. Then suddenly his finger moved. Crack! The report echoed like thunder off canyon walls. The spotter flinched. A long pause. Then ping! A clean, unmistakable strike. The steel rang out like a church bell in the desert. And for the first time that day, absolute silence followed. The steel gong still rang in their ears when Michael Bray calmly stood up and stepped back from the mat. He didn't smile, he didn't gloat. He simply broke the rifle open, pulled out the spent casing, and tucked it gently into the cloth of his handkerchief, as if honoring an old friend. Then he folded the M40, brushing the remaining droplets of Coca-Cola from the stock, with quiet dignity. No celebration. No victory stance. Just stillness. And that more than the shot itself unnerved the men around him. Private Torres looked as if he wanted to melt into the gravel. His hands clenched the now empty soda bottle. His smirk from earlier vanished, replaced by a clenched jaw and darting eyes. Miller shifted uncomfortably. The challenge had been issued in jest, but the shot was no joke. The wind had obeyed him. The steel had sung for him, and in return, the man gave nothing back. No pride, no shame. Just poise. And that kind of silence made everyone feel loud. One Marine finally clapped, slowly, unsure. Another followed, but the applause felt hollow. Michael said nothing. Instead, he bent down, running his hand along the mat, not searching for brass, just straightening it, tidying what he had used. He moved like someone raised by discipline, not ego. Bella Donovan exhaled slowly. The weight of what she had just witnessed pressed heavily on her chest. That wasn't just a great shot. That was deliberate art. She had seen elite snipers miss that shot with better gear, and he'd done it covered in soda under pressure with an outdated weapon and a crowd jeering. And yet he'd made them all feel like students. Then the whispering began. Did you see that dead center? He read the wind like it spoke English. Who the hell is this guy? But among the murmurs, one voice cut through sharp defensive. Must have been luck. All heads turned to Miller. He said it again, this time louder. One shot. That's not proof of anything. Hell, even a busted watch is right twice a day. Michael looked up. Not angry. Just tired. It wasn't luck, he said quietly. It was wind time and 30 years of paying attention. Miller scoffed. You think you're some sniper god? You're a janitor who got one lucky ping. Michael slung his rifle onto his back and took one step forward. And then, splash. The second bottle of Coca-Cola struck him from the side this time, uncapped mid-arc. It drenched his shoulder, poured across his chest, down his sleeves over his boots. Cold fizz crackled as it soaked into his jacket and ran in thick amber streaks down the M40's walnut stock. Gasps broke out across the range. Someone muttered, "Dude, what are you doing?" Michael didn't move. The man stood there, soaking jaw relaxed, blinking only once. Captain Bella took a step forward instinctively. Private Torres. But Michael raised one hand again. Still calm, still in control. No need, he said. Let the bottle speak. It was an odd phrase, almost biblical. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a faded, oil-stained cloth. Wordlessly, he unwrapped it and began to wipe down the scope. Slow, careful passes, as if he were bathing a wounded comrade. The Marines watched, paralyzed. They had seen rage before tantrums from rookies, barks from sergeants' fistfights, over ego. But this was humbling. Torres finally broke. It was just a joke, man. Michael didn't even look at him. Jokes are supposed to be funny. Another long silence. Bella's voice dropped low. That's enough. Everyone back to formation. Now! The Marines scattered, some avoiding Michael's gaze, others sneaking guilty glances over their shoulders. Torres, now ghost white, stood frozen before following the others. Only Miller remained behind. He walked up to Michael, face unreadable. You trying to teach me something, old man? Michael looked him dead in the eye. No, I was trying to spare you. Miller stiffened. Spare me. What Michael folded the cloth, returned it to his pocket, then hoisted the M40 back over his shoulder. The day you realize that pride has worse recoil than any weapon you'll ever fire. Then he walked away. Past Bella. Past the muttering Marines. Past the scorched gravel and fluttering range flags. Bella turned slowly and watched him go, her voice soft but heavy. He didn't just hit the target, she said under her breath. He was the target. She didn't know yet what that meant, but she felt it deep in her bones. This man wasn't just some relic. He was a mirror one that showed others what they didn't want to see in themselves. The Coca-Cola still clung to Michael's collar, now drying in syrupy streaks under the relentless sun. But he didn't feel it. Not the heat. Not the stares. Not even the shame that had been aimed at him like bullets. Because as he walked beyond the range past the last berm where no one followed, The wind changed, not just around him, but within him. His boots crunched into the gravel until they met grass. Dead, brittle stalks swayed lazily. He dropped his gear by an old shade tree, unrolled a faded canvas, and sat. The air was still. Then a breeze whispered across his cheek, and he was gone. Not from the range, but from the year. It was 1973. Michael was 19, crouched under a canopy of wet green, soaked in a mixture of monsoon rain and his own fear. Vietnam's Central Highlands smelled like rot gun oil and something ancient in the soil that had seen too much death. His rifle, the same M40 now resting beside him, was pressed to his chest, protected from the downpour. The scope fogged briefly, then cleared. He had wrapped it in strips of plastic from a ration bag. Improvised, like everything else. 2 minutes came a whisper through the headset. The team was pinned. 7 Marines all caught in a kill zone after a failed extraction near Pleiku. A DSHK heavy machine gun, Russian-made, well hidden, had them zeroed in from across a ridge. Trees exploded around them every time someone moved. The radio was jammed. Their corpsman was already dead. Michael had been the only one not seen. Not yet. He was the team's spotter then, not the lead sniper. That job had belonged to Sergeant Knowles, but Knowles was bleeding out 20 feet behind him, whispering the Lord's Prayer while gripping his stomach with both hands. Michael Knowles croaked. "You see it?" Michael's voice trembled. "I think so." "You feel it." Michael paused, then slowly looked downrange across 900 yards of thick brush and jungle wind. The kind of wind that didn't move in one direction but rolled like a living thing, like a spirit tasting blood. He closed his eyes, listened. Rain on leaves, a gust from the left. Birds that should be chirping silent now. He imagined the terrain like a breathing animal. "I feel it," he whispered back. "Take the shot." Michael chambered a single round. He steadied the rifle across a fallen root, his heartbeat sinking to the tremble of the trigger. He counted the seconds between gusts, watched how leaves danced, not flapped, twitched. That meant cross pressure. He adjusted 1/2 mil not because of the wind meter. It was broken, but because he'd seen how a dragonfly hovered crookedly over the brush, tiny wings fighting imbalance. He fired. Crack. Ping. Then silence. No return fire. No screams. Just birdsong. Michael exhaled, and the jungle exhaled with him. Back in the present, Michael opened his eyes slowly, feeling the weight of decades settle into his spine, the same spine that had once curled around a rifle under enemy fire, the same breath that once stilled chaos long enough to save 7 men. But no one here knew that. To the young Marines, he was just an old man with a ghost rifle. They didn't see the blood-soaked hands, the folded letters, the eyes of enemies through a scope, the breath he held when he aimed not to kill, but to protect. They didn't know that the hardest part was never the shot. It was what came after. Bella stood not far away, watching him from a distance, now clipboard in hand, but forgotten. She had dismissed the men for a break, telling them to hydrate and cool off. But she hadn't taken her eyes off him. She had seen the shift in his body language, the way his hands' stilled eyes drifted. She'd seen that look before on returning soldiers wounded, not in flesh, but in memory. She stepped toward him. He didn't look up. She spoke gently. "Where were you just now?" Michael took a moment before answering. Then somewhere hot, somewhere green, somewhere that doesn't stop echoing. She nodded. Silence sat between them for a moment, not awkward, but respectful. "Do they know," she asked, "who you are?" He finally met her eyes. "They will. But it's not about who I was. It's about what they might become if they ever stop trying to win and start trying to listen." To what? To everything he said. The wind, their heartbeat, the people around them, the voice that says, wait, when the world says, shoot. Bella hesitated. Then why did you come here? Mr. Bray, Michael glanced back at the range, at the flags, the rifles, the shouting. At the younger version of himself, he saw in every face. I came because someone needs to tell them the truth, he said. And truth usually arrives in silence. Then he smiled, faint but sincere. And I missed the sound of steel ringing in the wind. Ben Daniels hadn't meant to dial. In fact, his thumb hovered over the number for a solid 10 seconds, hesitating like a soldier, before stepping off the ramp into darkness. The contact name on his phone glowed beneath the Arizona sun. MJY Setagingta Dalton. Force Recon Ret. He could still back out. Just delete the message. Go back to pretending that what he saw today was normal. A weird anomaly. A fluke from a dusty old man who got lucky. But that shot. That one shot. It hadn't just hit steel. It had hit something inside him. He glanced across the range. Michael Bray was seated under the tree again, cleaning his rifle with meticulous care, as if it were a living thing, not a tool. His movements were patient, precise, and eerily calm. The soda stains on his jacket had dried to a dark amber crust, yet he didn't seem bothered, not humiliated, not proud, just centered. Ben tapped the call icon. The line connected before the first full ring. Dalton, Sir Ben's voice cracked. He cleared his throat and started again. Sir, this is Lance Corporal Ben Daniels, stationed at Whiskey Range today. I think something's going on here you'd want to know about. A pause. Define something, Daniels. Ben glanced again toward Michael. We've got a civilian on site. Older guy. Long hair, green field jacket. Calls himself Michael Bray. Says he's maintenance crew. But sir, he made a 200-yard shot with an M40. Silence. Ben added quickly. First try. No computer. No spotter. No wind meter. With soda in his scope. More silence. Sir Dalton's voice when it returned was different. Sharper. Lower. Like a blade being drawn. Say that name again. Michael Bray, sir. A breath. Not a gasp. Not disbelief. But the kind of breath men take when old ghosts rise. Where exactly is he now? Under the tree behind Range Deck 3. Not armed, sir, just cleaning. Another pause. Then Dalton's voice came in hard. Listen carefully, son. You do not let anyone approach him with disrespect. Not your CO, not your buddies, not even the wind. Ben stiffened. Yes, sir. But why Dalton's voice dipped into gravel? Because if that's who I think it is, your entire unit just tried to humiliate a legend. Ben's blood chilled. Sir, respectfully, he didn't look like much. Then you weren't looking hard enough. Michael Bray is the reason I'm still breathing. The reason a dozen others didn't come home in body bags. Ben swallowed. Dalton continued. They called him the Sand Ghost Taliban, gave him that name. He could vanish into wind shoot through smoke and see through mirage. Not just a sniper. He was the doctrine. Ben's grip tightened on the phone. I need you to stay put, Dalton ordered. No more challenges. No more jokes. I'm calling Colonel Hayes. Colonel Hayes. Ben choked. Sir, that's a 2-star. He'll want to know. Trust me. The call ended. Ben stood there, stunned, the phone still warm in his hand. Behind him, the others had resumed formation. Miller barked instructions with extra volume, trying to drown out the echo of his own embarrassment. Torres stood, rigid, sweat trickling down his back. No one was laughing now. Ben turned. Michael was watching him. Not angrily, not curiously, just knowingly. Ben took a cautious step forward. Sir Michael tilted his head slightly. I wanted to say, that shot was something else. Michael's voice was even. It wasn't the shot. Ben blinked. Sir, it was the waiting before the shot, Michael said. The part you didn't see." Ben nodded slowly, though he wasn't sure he understood. Then Michael added almost like an afterthought, "Thank you for making that call." Ben's jaw dropped. You heard me." Michael didn't smile, but the corner of his eye creased just a fraction. "The wind carries more than just dust," he said. Ben stared, mouth slightly open. Then Michael turned back to his rifle, gently polishing the bolt like it was an old memory. Meanwhile, 25 miles away, Colonel Brooks Hayes was in the middle of a procurement call when his secure line lit up. The name on the screen froze him mid-sentence. Mgizgo Dalton. Urgent. He excused himself and stepped into his private office. "Dalton." Sir Dalton replied instantly. "Whiskey Range. We've got a situation." "What kind of situation, Michael Bray?" Hayes went completely still. Dalton added, "He's there. Right now." Just made a ghost shot. The silence on Hayes' end was profound. Sir Dalton prompted. Hayes finally spoke. "Clear my schedule. You'll go, I owe him that much," Hayes said. Then hung up. The first thing they heard was the hum. Low at first, like distant thunder crawling over sunburned hills. Then came the dust. Fine particles kicked up along the horizon, curling into the air like desert smoke. The tremble underfoot followed, subtle like the ground, exhaling in warning. Private Jenkins looked up from his spotting scope. Are we under exercise?" Sergeant Miller narrowed his eyes at the approaching formation. "Not scheduled." Bella Donovan lowered her clipboard. 3 Humvees matte black military issue barreled down the access road flanking Whiskey Range. Not the rusted transport units used for drills. These were clean, maintained, federal. The lead vehicle bore a single insignia on the hood, a gold Marine Eagle globe and anchor enclosed in a black star. One rank reserved for field visits of high interest. The vehicles didn't slow. They commanded the gravel beneath them, tires crunching with absolute authority. When they stopped, it was with the surgical precision of a strike team. Doors opened in unison, and out stepped Colonel Brooks Hayes. Silver-haired, tall. His uniform pressed like it had never seen a wrinkle. His face carved from duty, not age. Eyes like glass, clear, cold, and reflective. Every Marine on the field instinctively straightened, including Miller. Bella's breath caught for just a second. She'd only seen Hayes once years ago at a war memorial ceremony. He was spoken of more than seen a commander who didn't demand silence, but created it merely by entering a room. Hayes didn't bark. He didn't scan. He walked, direct, controlled, toward one man. Michael Bray hadn't moved. He sat beneath the same tree, still polishing the M40's bolt, as if the world were not stirring dust around him. The entire field watched as the colonel's boots stopped just 3 feet from Michael. Hayes paused. The silence stretched taut unbearably, so like the breath before a trigger breaks. Then, in front of every private corporal and sergeant on that line, Colonel Brooks Hayes raised his hand in a full, formal salute. "Sir," he said clearly, voice steady as stone. "Permission to speak freely." Michael looked up, one eyebrow slightly raised. Then, as if time had never passed between them, he stood not quickly, not slowly, but deliberately. His back was straight, shoulders squared, jacket stained with soda dust clinging to the cuffs, and he returned the salute. "You never needed permission," Colonel Michael said softly. Gasps were audible across the range. Hayes' eyes glinted. "I owe you 1,000 words, Bray. But let me start with one." He stepped closer. "Thank you." Michael tilted his head. "Took you long enough." Hayes smirked, a rare expression for a man whose jaw had more often clenched than smiled. Then he turned to the assembled Marines, especially Miller and his team. "I understand," he said, "there's been an incident today." Misunderstanding." Miller swallowed, stiffening. Hayes' continued voice now sharpening. I heard someone poured a Coca-Cola over a rifle, over a Marine sniper, over a man who once carried 3 wounded officers on his back while returning fire with that same rifle, which, if I'm not mistaken, still outshot every one of you today. Torres looked like he might vomit. Jenkins went pale. Miller stayed frozen, jaw locked. Hayes pointed to the M40 resting beside Michael's gear. That weapon, that man, doesn't belong in your jokes. He belongs in your textbooks. He turned to Bella. Captain Donovan, I'm hereby assigning Mr. Bray the designation of temporary senior ballistics advisor to this range, effective immediately. Bella blinked. Yes, sir. Hayes looked at her longer than necessary. Then he nodded. You knew, didn't you? I had a feeling, she replied, voice measured. Hayes turned back to Michael. You saved my life, Kunar Province, 2006. I was stuck in a hot LZ with a collapsed lung and a dead sat phone. Taliban had me marked. He looked down at the M40. 3 shots. No misses. Don't know how you found me. Don't know how you saw through that smoke. Michael shrugged. I listened to the wind. Hayes chuckled. Always the poet. The colonel's face hardened again as he turned to the Marines. Today you all learned something they won't teach you at Quantico. Not in your manuals, not in your fancy gear. He walked down the line slowly. Some warriors speak with fists, some speak with fire. But the most dangerous man on a battlefield is the one who speaks with restraint. He stopped in front of Torres. You're lucky this man doesn't hold grudges. Torres nodded, ashamed. Then Hayes reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out something small, a coin etched with a Marine insignia and a single call sign, Sand Ghost. He pressed it into Michael's hand. Figured it was time it came back to you. Michael looked at it a moment. I never lost it, he said. Just left it where I knew someone might remember. Hayes smiled, then turned back to the Marines. You will remember this day, he said, because the wind doesn't carry words, it carries lessons. And with that, he nodded once more to Michael, the kind of nod soldiers gave to each other when words were too small. Then he walked back to the Humvees, never once looking back. The engines roared. The convoy pulled away. And as the dust settled again, silence remained. But this time it was filled not with confusion, but with respect. No one moved for a long time after the convoy disappeared. The dust hadn't even settled, and yet something in the air had changed, something heavier than silence, thicker than heat. Like the moment after a funeral, when everyone realizes the world will never go back to what it was a few hours earlier. They all stared at the man beneath the tree. But now, they saw him. Not the janitor. Not the joke. Not the old man with a dusty rifle. They saw the Marine sniper who had just been saluted by a colonel. The man who had a kill shot cleaner than any of them had ever witnessed. The one whose name came with a story whispered over decades of sand smoke and legend. The Sand Ghost. Sergeant David Miller didn't speak. His pride, so loud just hours earlier, was now swallowed by something far more unfamiliar humility. Captain Bella Donovan stepped forward slowly, her boots crunching softly on gravel. She didn't speak right away. She just stood near Michael, her clipboard forgotten back at the table. You saved Hayes, she said. Finally, voice gentle. Did anyone ever officially thank you? Michael looked up, the coin still in his palm. The Army gave me a plaque. Misspelled my name, he said dryly. Then asked me to train drones. Bella didn't laugh. No one did. She crouched slightly, voice lowered, so only he could hear. Why did you stay silent when they mocked you, when they poured soda on you? Michael studied the coin for a long moment before answering. Because I've seen what it looks like when young men think violence is strength. I've seen what happens when ego pulls the trigger faster than wisdom can breathe. He closed his hand over the coin. If I'd shouted, they would have shouted louder. If I'd struck back, they would have missed the point. Bella's throat tightened. Behind her, the rest of the Marines stood in a quiet cluster, unsure whether to approach or retreat. No one barked orders now. No one joked. Even Torres had taken a step back, his head bowed so low it looked like it might detach. Then Michael rose, slowly, deliberately. He walked toward the firing line not with swagger, but with weight, as if each step carried history behind it. When he reached the edge, he stopped and turned. His voice was calm, but clear, measured, like the final note of a song that had taken years to write. "You think I'm just a story now," he said. "You think the wind obeys me because I'm old and lucky." No one answered. Michael glanced at Torres. "You think throwing Coke on a man makes you the stronger one." Torres swallowed hard. "Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't know." Michael raised a hand. "I'm not looking for an apology." Then he looked at the entire team one by one. Jenkins, Logan, Ben, even Miller. "I'm looking for a question." Ben Daniels, after a long silence, asked it. "What question?" Michael's eyes held steady. "When will you stop shooting to prove something? And start shooting to protect something?" The words hit like a shot through fog. Jenkins shifted awkwardly. Logan looked at the ground. Even Miller's lips parted slightly. His breath shallow. Michael continued, quieter now. "You think being a sniper means precision power control. It doesn't. It means burden. You see farther than others, which means you see the consequences sooner. It means taking the shot only when silence will cost lives." He touched the rifle on his back gently. "This weapon didn't make me dangerous. Learning when not to use it did." Bella blinked back, a sudden sting in her eyes. Michael turned to walk away, but paused again. Then added, almost like a confession, "I used to be just like you. Young, proud, needing to be seen, needing to be feared." He looked out toward the shimmering horizon. But fear is cheap. It doesn't build anything. It only burns. Then he walked back toward his gear, and this time the silence wasn't just reverent. It was transformed. Ben Daniels followed him a few steps. "Sir, Mr. Bray, may I ask something else?" Michael stopped, turned. Ben hesitated, then asked, "Why did you come back here?" Now, Michael tilted his head, then said simply, "Because someone always has to teach the ones who forget why they enlisted in the first place." He gave Ben a slow nod, not one of superiority, one of invitation. And for the first time since that morning, Ben smiled, not out of humor, but understanding. Michael returned to his canvas mat, unpacked the bolt again, and began cleaning. This time, no one looked away. Torres slowly stepped forward with a rag and bottle of water. Without a word, he knelt beside Michael and held out the bottle. Michael didn't look up, he just took it, and kept cleaning. Together, the sun had begun its slow descent, casting long shadows over Whiskey Range. The temperature dipped slightly, but the air still shimmered in waves of heat, as if refusing to let go of the intensity that had crackled all day. Captain Bella Donovan stepped forward, her voice carrying just enough to reach Michael Bray, still seated near his rifle. "Mr. Bray." Michael looked up, the dried Coca-Cola still faintly staining the collar of his jacket. "The men," Bella continued. "They'd like to see you shoot again." Michael blinked once, not surprised, not amused, just still. "Why?" he asked softly. Bella glanced back toward the group, a quiet circle of Marines now standing shoulder to shoulder, no longer mocking, no longer proud. Even Sergeant Miller stood among them, arms crossed, jaw tight, but silent. "To learn," Bella said, "to see what patience really looks like through a scope." Michael didn't move, not yet. Colonel Hayes already saw the shot, he said. He heard the steel. Bella nodded. But they didn't understand it. A pause. Then she added quieter, "Not until now." Michael stood slowly. He stretched his shoulders, the kind of stretch men do when they know they're about to carry something heavier than steel. He stepped toward the range. The men instinctively made way, not out of command, but respect. The same way a church quiets when the organ hums. He reached the firing line. This time, no one challenged. No one smirked. No one reached for a soda bottle. The M40 was already clean, because Michael always cleaned it before a shot, not after. He knelt, unfolded his mat, and lowered himself into prone position. This time, there were no tools, no adjustments, no calculations, just wind and silence. Then Colonel Hayes's voice rang out again from the return of the Humvee, now parked off to the side. He had not left, after all. "Let him do it the way Marines do," Hayes said. "No kestrels, no digital meters, no monitors, just man. Rifle, earth." Michael gave the faintest nod of approval. Then, like a ritual, he ran his fingers along the barrel, felt the temperature, touched the glass on the scope, warm but not warped. He didn't speak, but in his mind, he listened. The breeze whistling faintly through the canyons passed the 600-yard marker. The sun warming the steel plate just enough to warp the shimmer around its edges. A small curl of dust lifting behind the 900-yard rock, meaning ground wind, subtle but right to left. He closed his eyes and exhaled. Then, without warning, he fired. Crack. Ping. Again the steel rang. But this time, there was something else. A bird startled from the tree above. A pause in the wind. And then applause. But not the loud, hollow kind. This was the slow, reverent kind, hands moving not to cheer, but to honor. Even Miller clapped. Michael remained still, cheek still, pressed to the stock for a full 5 seconds after the shot. Then he looked up, met Bella's eyes, and said, "Don't ever ask for a second shot just to be entertained. This isn't a circus." Bella nodded solemnly. "It wasn't for entertainment." "I know," he said, "but make sure they remember that." He stood up slowly, not because he was tired, but because everything he did was measured. Every move said something. Then he looked toward Miller. "I was you once," Michael said. "Faster than anyone. Sharper. Thought the battlefield was my stage." Miller's face twitched. Not from shame, from recognition. Michael continued. "Then I lost a spotter who told me the wind had shifted. I didn't listen. I was too proud. The bullet missed by 6 inches. He held up his fingers. 6 inches between a missed shot and a dead friend. The words were heavier than any metal. Michael stepped back from the mat, unhooked the bolt, and placed it gently on top of the folded cloth. Then, to everyone's surprise, he handed the rifle to Ben Daniels. Ben froze. Michael nodded. "You saw the shot. Now feel the silence." Ben knelt, touched the rifle like it was sacred. The M40 felt heavier than its weight. Not in metal, in meaning. Michael guided his hands. "Forget the steel. Forget the team. Listen." "What does the breeze say?" Ben swallowed. It rolls. Right to left," Good Michael whispered. "Now what about the ground?" Ben squinted. "Dust curls left. And the mirage," Ben blinked. "It dances, but low. Heat's leaving." Michael nodded once. "You just read 5 pages of information without a screen. Now imagine what else you're not listening to in your life." Ben said nothing, but he understood. He lowered the rifle. Didn't fire, just breathed. Michael smiled faintly. Smart man. As Ben stood, Michael looked around the group one last time. "You want to be elite," he said. "Then stop asking what the bullet can do." He paused. "Start asking what you should do." And with that, he walked back toward the edge of the range where no cheers waited, no medals, no fanfare, just wind. and the sound of steel still ringing in memory. The morning after the shot, Whiskey Range was quieter than usual. No one yelled. No one barked. Even the sound of cleaning weapons felt somehow more respectful. The gravel didn't crunch, it whispered. The wind didn't blow, it spoke. And the Marines, they listened. At 0700, Michael Bray returned to the range. No one told him to. No official orders had been given. But Captain Bella Donovan, after a short exchange with Colonel Hayes the night before, had quietly shifted the schedule. Block A advanced ballistics. Instructor Mr. Bray. Michael stood before the dozen Marines, still in his worn green jacket sleeves, stained with old dust and memory. His rifle remained slung across his back, untouched for this lesson. His hands were empty. "I'm not here to teach you how to shoot," he began. "You've got instructors for that." He paused, scanning their faces. "What you don't have," he continued, "is someone to teach you how to hear the wind before it speaks." Jenkins, the youngest of the group, raised a brow. "With respect, sir, we already know wind formulas." Michael tilted his head, not condescending, simply thoughtful. "And yet your bullets still miss when the equipment fails." The point landed. He walked toward a small hill just behind the target zone, motioning for the group to follow. They obeyed without question. Once at the top, Michael pulled a small piece of paracord from his pocket. Tied to the end, a feather. Something simple. Lightweight. He planted it into the ground with a stick, then stood back. "What's that going to do?" asked Torres, still a little defensive, though visibly changed since the incident. Michael smiled faintly. "You're about to find out." He crouched beside it. "Watch the feather. But not just how it moves. Watch when it doesn't." For a full minute, nothing happened. Then the feather twitched. Michael didn't flinch. "That's a layer 3 crosswave. Ground level." Jenkins leaned in. "Wait. The Kestrel didn't even pick that up yesterday." "It won't," Michael replied. "Most wind meters measure average movement. But the feather reads hesitation. That's where the secrets are." Ben Daniels knelt beside him. "So what do we do with that?" Michael looked him square in the eye. "You slow down. You breathe with it. You let the world around you stop being background noise and start becoming part of your calculation." He stood up, facing the team again. "You think your scope is your greatest tool? It's not. Your greatest tool is your willingness to be quiet." Miller finally spoke, his voice more grounded than before. "What about instinct?" Michael gave a short nod. "That's earned, not given. Instinct is just memory refined into action." Torres, more curious now than cocky, asked, "And the rifle?" "How do you know when it's ready?" Michael's smile softened. "The rifle's always ready. The question is, are you?" That line, simple, unadorned, landed like a stone dropped into still water. Bella, watching from the edge of the group, folded her arms, a rare smile tugging at her mouth. She hadn't seen the unit this still in weeks, not tense, not frozen, just present. Later that afternoon, Michael led them through a different drill, no targets, just observation. They were to lay prone on the ridge for 30 minutes and write down what they saw, not through scopes, but with their eyes. "How many shifts in the wind?" Michael asked. "How many birds flew past?" "What color was the dust at 300 yards compared to 900? At first, the team was baffled, but gradually they stopped fidgeting. They started noticing. By the end, Ben Daniels could describe the wind change as soft tremors under the skin. Torres admitted he could finally see how the sand curled differently between markers. Jenkins, of all people, described the difference in sound between the breeze at his left cheek and right boot. Michael said nothing, just nodded. At chow that evening, they didn't talk about kills or weapons. They talked about wind, about waiting, about what it meant to carry a rifle without needing to use it. And that Bella realized was the real lesson. That night, Michael sat alone beneath the same tree, the one now quietly regarded as his spot. The wind was cooler, softer. Bella approached, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. He accepted one without a word. They drank in silence for a moment. Then she asked, "Did you ever think you'd teach again?" Michael stared into the trees. "No. Thought I'd left all that behind." So why now? He looked at her. And for the first time, there was a glint of fragility behind the steel in his eyes. "Because someone taught me once," he said, "when I didn't deserve it. And now, maybe it's time I pass that grace forward." Bella nodded, understanding deeper than words allowed. Then Michael added, "Besides, I saw something today I haven't seen in years." What he looked back toward the range, a Marine who chose not to take the shot, even when he could. Bella smiled. "The best shot is the one you never have to fire." Michael raised his mug in salute. "To the wind," he said quietly. "To the ones who listen," Bella replied. By the end of the week, something had shifted at Whiskey Range. The cracks in the dirt had not filled. The heat had not relented. But the sound of shouting had given way to quiet murmurs, and the clicks of scopes now followed the rhythm of breath instead of pride. In the center of this change stood a man with weathered boots, a worn jacket, and a rifle that looked older than most of the recruits. Michael Bray. But he no longer stood alone. Beside him, crouched in the dirt, was Lance Corporal Ben Daniels. Eyes narrowed, body relaxed, and hands resting lightly on the M40's stock, like it was no longer just a weapon, but an instrument. Michael didn't teach like the instructors did. He didn't speak in bullet drop charts or MOA math. He spoke in silence and glances, in the way a blade of grass curled when the breeze shifted by 1 degree. "You see that shimmer at 700? He asked. Ben squinted, then nodded. "Yeah. Faint. Left to right. Don't trust it." Ben looked up. "Mirage isn't wind," Michael continued. "It's heat playing games with light. And if you fire based on tricks, you'll miss reality." Ben nodded slowly. "So what do I trust?" Michael leaned in. "Everything else. Smell the dust. Feel how it dries your lips faster on one side. Taste the silence. That's where the truth is." Ben didn't respond. He just exhaled. Long, controlled, and returned his eye to the scope. Michael smiled faintly. "You're learning." Across the range, Sergeant Miller watched, arms crossed, jaw tight. He hadn't spoken much since the colonel's visit. No longer barking, no longer mocking. He spent most of his time observing not Michael, but Ben. A week ago, Ben had been hot-headed, too fast on the trigger, always trying to prove himself. Now, he waited. Miller turned to Bella Donovan, who was taking notes on the changes to the unit. "You think this is real?" he asked. She looked up. "Define real." Miller pointed with his chin toward Ben. "You think he's actually changed, or just trying to impress Bray?" Bella didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "What matters more? The reason he changed, or the fact he did?" Miller didn't reply, but later that day, he walked quietly to the same observation post where Michael and Ben had just finished a long-range zeroing session. He approached Michael slowly. Michael turned, unsurprised. Miller took a breath. "I was wrong about you." Michael didn't gloat. He didn't even nod. He just said, "I was wrong about me once, too." The 2 men stood there in silence, not adversaries anymore, not equals either, but aligned. Then Miller extended something small, a folded paper with wind call notes scribbled in haste. Michael raised an eyebrow. "I thought you didn't trust paper," he said. "I don't," Miller replied. "That's why I'm giving it to someone who does." Michael accepted it. For the first time, the silence between them was not strained. It was earned. That evening around the mess tent, the Marines gathered for chow. But this time, Michael was invited. He didn't sit at the end. He sat in the center. And no one flinched when he unfolded the bolt of his rifle on the table and began to clean it beside his tray of rice and beef. Ben leaned in. "You always clean it twice a day?" Michael nodded. "Even when I don't shoot. It's not about performance. It's about respect." Jenkins asked, "Did you name your rifle?" Michael chuckled. "Never. Naming something makes you forget what it really is." "And what is it?" Logan asked. Michael met his eyes. A promise. The table went quiet. Torres, still quieter than usual, finally spoke. "I didn't think a week ago we'd be sitting here like this." Michael looked at him, not with judgment, but with honesty. "You thought pain made you powerful," he said. "Turns out restraint makes you stronger." Torres nodded. "I get that now." Then he added quieter, "I want to be better." Michael took a long sip of water, then tapped the bolt on the table. "You already are." That night, in the makeshift quarters behind the armory, Ben sat on his bunk, writing a letter. The barracks was dim, filled only with the faint hum of a single ceiling fan and the soft scuffle of boots outside. He wrote slowly, deliberately, "Dear Dad, today, I watched a man teach 12 Marines how to breathe before they shoot. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't raise his fists. He just waited. And we followed. I think I understand now why you always said a quiet man carries the loudest lessons. You'd have liked him. He carries ghosts, but he doesn't burden anyone with them. He carries them like wind, invisible, but always present. I want to be like that. Ben." Outside, Michael Bray stood beneath a sky clear enough to see constellations. He looked up the Arizona wind, brushing gently past his cheek, like a memory that didn't hurt anymore. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't watching the horizon for danger. He was watching it for hope. And the wind didn't fight him tonight. It carried forward. The package arrived wrapped in plain brown paper. It was waiting on Michael Bray's bunk when he returned from the range that evening, tucked neatly under his blanket. No signature, no ceremony. Only a single name scribbled in careful cursive, "To Dad, from Maddie." He stared at it for a moment, letting the sight of her handwriting sink in. He hadn't seen it in years. Not since she started medical school, not since he told her to chase her dream and not worry about the old ghost sweeping brass on government ranges. He peeled back the paper slowly. Inside was a thin envelope, and under it a small flash drive sealed in a plastic zip bag. He opened the letter first. "Dear Dad, I saw you on video, not the one from the news or the base. I saw the clip someone took the shot, the silence afterward, the way the younger Marines just stood there like they'd witnessed something sacred. And then I saw you clean your scope with a sleeve still wet with soda. Calm, steady, like nothing could shake you. It made me cry, Dad. Not because they humiliated you, but because you chose not to humiliate them back. I always wondered why you never talked much about the war, about your medals, about the scars. But I think I understand now. You didn't carry those stories because they were heavy. You carried them because you knew. One day someone would need to hear them the right way, not in shouting, not in rage, but in the sound a rifle makes when fired with grace. Dad, I'm proud of you. I always was. But now, I understand you. Thank you for teaching me even when you didn't speak. Love, Maddie." Michael held the letter in both hands, staring at the ink until the words blurred. He blinked once, then folded the letter neatly and slid it into his jacket pocket near his heart. Later that night, he stepped outside the barracks flash drive in hand. The stars were out clear and still. He made his way to the small rec room, where an old government-issue laptop sat unused in the corner. He plugged in the drive. There was only one file. For Dad, springpresentation.mp4. He clicked. The screen lit up. Maddie stood in a small university auditorium, her white coat sleeves rolled up, a nervous smile on her face. A PowerPoint glowed behind her with the title, "Healing Through Stillness: What Combat Medicine Can Learn from the Field." Michael leaned in. She began speaking calm, steady, clear. In medical training, we're taught that trauma response is all about time, about speed reaction protocol. But my father taught me something different. He said that sometimes the most important thing in chaos is to stop, to observe, to breathe. He wasn't a doctor. He was a sniper. But what he did wasn't about taking life. It was about protecting it, about knowing when not to pull the trigger, about seeing the bigger picture. And when I treat patients now, especially under pressure, I hear his voice. "Maddie, don't race the moment. Let the moment come to you." And it does. The audience in the video grew quiet. Then soft applause. Michael exhaled. And for the first time in years, he felt something he couldn't explain. Not pride, not grief, but completion. A circle closed. The next day, Michael walked the range with a renewed stillness. Not heavier, but anchored. Ben Daniels jogged to catch up beside him. "Sir, you all right?" Michael nodded. "I got a letter." From who? Michael looked out toward the desert. "Someone who remembers why I kept going." Ben smiled, unsure what that meant, but knowing better than to press. That morning's training was different. Michael didn't speak about bullets. He spoke about intent. "When you pick up a rifle," he said, "you're not just picking up metal. You're picking up every moment that led to this one. Every decision. Every hesitation you ignored. Every second you waited. That's what pulls the trigger." He held up a rock. "Tell me what this is," Jenkins replied. "A rock, sir." Michael tossed it. "Wrong. That was a potential ricochet, a failed deflection, a story you didn't read because you weren't paying attention." Ben chuckled softly. "You're really into metaphors, huh?" Michael smirked. "No, I'm into survival." That evening, Bella found him sitting alone again this time, scribbling something in a leather-bound notebook. "You write now?" Michael glanced up. "Not really." She sat beside him. "Letter to your daughter." He nodded. "Thought it was time I wrote something back." She paused. "What did you say?" Michael closed the notebook slowly. "That maybe I wasn't trying to protect the world from what I'd seen." He looked out into the fading horizon. "Maybe I was trying to protect myself from the world seeing me." Bella nodded, her voice soft. "She sees you now." Michael smiled, aged, but still sharp. "She always did. I just needed to see her seeing me." The last morning at Whiskey Range arrived wrapped in golden light. It was the kind of sunrise that didn't announce itself with drama, but with quiet authority, like a respected old general entering a room. No one spoke much during breakfast. Even the clatter of trays was muted, as if the whole camp knew something sacred was coming to a close. Michael Bray stood at the edge of the ridge facing east, where the desert stretched wide and eternal. He wore the same green jacket, now washed and dried, but still bearing the soft trace of Coca-Cola at the hem. Not a stain. A story. Behind him, a dozen Marines stood in formation. But this time, it wasn't about rank. Wasn't even about protocol. It was respect. Ben Daniels stepped forward, holding the M40 in both hands. "I cleaned her for you, sir." Michael looked at the rifle, then back at Ben. "She's yours now." Ben blinked. Sir Michael took the rifle, then offered it back again, this time, with the bolt removed, wrapped in the same cloth he'd used every day. "You've earned the right to carry it," he said. "Not because of how you shoot, but because of how you listen." Ben's throat tightened. "I don't know what to say." Michael shrugged. "That's good. Real moments don't need speeches." Ben took the rifle, gently holding it like a gift, made of memory. Captain Bella Donovan stepped forward next. "You sure you want to leave today?" she asked. Colonel Hayes said he'd approve a permanent post. You could stay train full-time. Michael smiled, soft and tired. "I was never meant to stay." She tilted her head. "Why not?" "Because the wind never stays," he said. "It just passes through and leaves something changed behind." Bella nodded, lips pressed tight. "You'll be missed." Michael looked around at the Marines. "Then maybe I did something right." Torres stepped forward, next the same young man who had once poured soda over his back. He now stood, stiff eyes clear. "I've written a letter to my father," Torres said. "He served. I never asked about it. But after this week, I think I'm ready to listen." Michael placed a hand on his shoulder, brief but firm. "Make the call," he said, "before silence becomes permanent." Torres nodded. Then Jenkins offered him a single brass casing, polished, engraved with the number 1200. "We marked the plate," Jenkins said. "Your shot's still there, dead center." Michael took the casing, turned it in his hand once, and smiled. It was never about the steel, he said. They waited. Then Ben asked the question hanging in the air. What was it about Michael looked out toward the horizon? It was about knowing that the wind never lies, he said. Only people do when they're too proud to hear what the wind already told them. Before he left, Bella walked with him to the edge of the base where an old truck waited. Government issue, faded paint, engine humming low like a heartbeat ready to rest. "You're not just a sniper," she said quietly. "You're a mirror." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" She smiled. "It means you made us look at ourselves, and what we saw wasn't always comfortable." Michael chuckled. "Growth never is." Then he reached into his jacket, pulled out the coin Colonel Hayes had returned to him. He held it out to her. "I think it belongs here." She refused. "That's yours?" Michael shook his head. "No," he said. "That's theirs. I was just holding it for the next story." Bella finally took it with both hands. No salute, no handshake, just silence. As the truck pulled away, Ben watched from the high Berm rifle across his back. The wind kicked up softly. He closed his eyes. Listened. No mirage. No false gusts. Just a soft curl at the left cheek and a slight pressure at the boots. 3 layers, he whispered, then smiled. He didn't need to shoot. He already knew. Behind him, the younger Marines watched him waiting to be taught. And without turning around, he said, "Don't aim yet. Just breathe." Far off in the distance, inside the rumbling truck, Michael sat with the window down. One arm resting on the ledge, hair tousled by the breeze, a photo tucked into the dashboard. Maddie in her white coat holding a stethoscope, her eyes lit by purpose. He glanced at it, then closed his eyes, and whispered, "I listened, Maddie." They heard me. The wind rolled through the open cab carrying no sound. But if someone had been listening closely, they would have heard it answer. And I carried you too. Where are you watching from today? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if this story reminded you of someone you admire, share it in the comments. If you enjoyed this quiet yet powerful journey, consider subscribing to Soul Moment Story. There's more to come. Stories of courage, healing, and the quiet strength we don't always see. Thank you for spending time with us. Until next time, stay kind, stay grounded, and remember, sometimes the strongest voice is the one that doesn't need to shout.